Well, hello, my friends. JW here, and welcome to another brand new episode of Dunswell Zoo. This episode, we are building the Reptiles at Risk complex. So, although it's sort of situated within the Pantanal region of the South America section of the zoo, the reptiles themselves aren't from the Pantanal. They're from all over South America, both mainland and the islands that make up South America as well. So we ended up building for seven species in total. Those being the Galapagos tortoise, the red-footed tortoise, the yellow-footed tortoise, the Orinoco crocodile, the lesser Antillean iguana, the golden poison frog, and Hlemmen's poison frog. The shape of the building has changed. Originally it was sort of like a parallelogram, stroke trapezoid, something like that. It's now just a rectangle. I really struggled getting the shape to get the habitats in and to get a roof on it, so it just made more sense to cut my losses and just go for a rectangle, which is fine. It works well for what it needs to do anyway. Yeah, so this underwater viewing gallery took absolutely ages. You can see we're sort of starting already in. I have recorded the footage before this, but the video would have been like an hour and a half long, even on 800 times speed. And nah, there's just no need. You know, I kept the footage in the giant otter to show you that you need to like persevere and keep at it and stuff like that, but this was a nightmare. This was nothing short of a nightmare. The pathing, the terrain, getting the water to work, making sure everything fits in and looks nice, the roof, just all of the above was an absolute nightmare. So I figured I'd start with the Orinoco crocodile, because that was sort of like the star attraction of this complex, because the rest of the habitat species are all tortoises, and then of course we have the exhibit species. I forgot, actually, we've got butterflies in here as well. So even though it's called Reptiles at Risk, we do also have the Menelaus blue morpho, I think it is, something like that. We have that butterfly in here because that is found in South America. So I'm just building a underwater viewing gallery because that's something I wanted for the Orinoco crocodile. I wanted underwater viewing and sort of above water viewing as well. The underwater viewing turned out alright. It's not fantastic, but for my first proper attempt at underwater viewing in Dunswell Zoo, apart from the disastrous giant otters in the last episode, this one turned out much better, even though it took a lot of attempts. If anything, I'm not happy with the above water viewing, but there's nothing that I can do about that, unfortunately. It's just the shape of the building and the amount of space we've got to work with. You know, as long as the animals have enough room, that's the main thing for me. If the viewing opportunities aren't fantastic, as long as the animal can be seen, that's all I really care about. So that's what we go with. Why make life more difficult? Plus, it's very good practice for what else is to come in the South America section as well. Penguins of Patagonia, possibly the jaguars might have underwater viewing. Not 100% decided on that yet. Probably should decide sooner or later because those episodes are coming up pretty quick. And then, of course, we have a new DLC on the way at the time of recording this. It's not been announced what the new DLC is, or when it's coming out. We just know that there's a special live stream, and that usually means update and DLC time, which is great news. Depending on what we get in that DLC, it might be that we can add some more animals to this area, or indeed the South America section in general. As it is, I think mods have got us covered at the moment, so it'd just be like swapping out the bush dogs, southern poodoo. I've got the mod for the southern poodoo, but it'd be great if we had an official one. the coati, stuff like that, I think, and the Andean bear, if that's what we're getting. If we're not getting those, then I look forward to seeing what we're getting instead. So here, just adjusting the terrain requirements for the Orinoco crocodile. The Orinoco crocodile, in case you don't know, is a critically endangered crocodile with a very small population. It is only found in the Orinoco River in Venezuela and Colombia. It has been extensively hunted for near enough 300 years for its skin, and it is one of the most endangered species of crocodilian on the planet. It's also a very large species of crocodilian. Males can grow up to about 6.8 meters, which is about 22.5 feet, I think, something like that, which is absolutely massive. Although those sizes haven't been seen in a very, very, very long time, probably due to the overhunting and things like that. But even still, sort of 5-6 meters is your average size, like sort of these days that you can find in the wild. That's still like 17, 18 feet, something like that. Probably a bit more than 18 actually. 17 to 20 I reckon would probably be the average size. Sexual dimorphism, not as profound as it is in other species, particularly crocodilian species. But there you go. The Orinoco crocodile is very poorly documented due to its particularly small population. It is an apex predator. It does have an opportunistic nature with primarily a piscivorous diet, so primarily like fish and crabs and things like that. But it will also take the opportunity to prey on reptiles, including caimans, birds and mammals, but typically it's large predatory fish. This challenges the general view of locals in the Orinoco area, because they believe that the crocodiles eat their fish stocks and therefore they deserve to be wiped out, when actually they tend to just eat large predatory fish. So take that. What else do I know about the Orinoco crocodile? I've never seen one in person, unfortunately, but that is very understandable because they are critically endangered. There's also 50, I think, individuals in zoos across the world, of which 35 are kept at Dallas World Aquarium. So if any of you watching have been to Dallas World Aquarium, please tell me if you've seen one of their many Orinoco crocodiles. There are also a large number of captive breeding facilities around the world where the Orinoco crocodiles are released into sort of ranches and paddocks and things like that, protected areas, just to ensure their survival, really. Unfortunately, however, there are a critical lack of funds and staff. There's also a conflict between private and state-owned facilities, and this, in combination with the live animal trade, pollution, plans to build a dam in the upper Orinoco River, and the booming population of spectacled caimans, it means that the Orinoco crocodiles are unfortunately losing their fight for survival, which is all the more reason to give them a home here in Dunswell Zoo, where they can hopefully breed and contribute to the captive breeding program, and their young can then be sent to other collections, and we'll have hopefully a stable breeding population of Orinoco crocodiles. Hopefully. Anywhere between 250 and 1,500 remain in the wild. And then of course you've got an additional 50 in zoos across the world. So I think the maximum you're looking at is probably 1,600 would be your absolute maximum, which isn't a lot at all. It might sound like a lot just for one species, but it really isn't. There are of course other animals that are far worse off than like 1,500, 1,600 individuals, but we're not talking about them in this episode. We're talking about the Orinoco crocodile. So here with the above ground viewing, or the above water viewing in this case, I wanted the guests to be able to see the Orinoco crocodiles on the surface of the water, but also on land. And you can see their land area, which is a bit sort of sandy and muddy at the moment. It does get spruced up a little bit, not too much. And then, yeah, there's specifically some viewing windows where it's only land. Just because, despite them being aquatic animals, they're not entirely aquatic. They don't spend their entire lives in water. They spend a lot of their life in water, but not their entire lives. Historically, the Orinoco crocodile would have inhabited the riparian habitats, so tropical forests and streams of the Andes foothills. However, today this species is restricted to the Llanos, savanna and seasonal freshwater rivers in the Orinoco River basin of Venezuela and Colombia. Hence me saying, just because it's situated in the Pantanal, it's actually its own separate little region, in the same way that Expedition Ecuador is situated in Adventure Andes. It's just its own little pocket, just because there's nowhere else to put it, really. There's no point making guests walk through this just to get to another zone. It makes more sense to have it sort of pocketed in another zone. But it has its own signage, you know, it's not the end of the world. And I quite like how it's panned out. So I'm trying to get the barrier to work here, but it's not having it. So I have to switch to the that one, yeah, that metal fence. I can't remember what it's called now. Metal sheet fence, something like that. And then I put some of this stone in there, like so. And then I'm just shuffling these around a little bit, just to get as close to the path as possible for optimal guest viewing experiences. I don't know why that stopped then. Pretty short and sweet, this little segment. It's just education boards, and then the fencing, I believe, for the... Oh no, there's the shelter, of course, my mistake. The shelter for the Orinoco crocodile. They are under a roof. There is glass in that roof, so if they just want a little bit of shade, a little bit of respite from the glaring sunshine of the United Kingdom, then they can do that in this shelter. That's what that's designed for, if I can get my words out. Ultimately, this entire building, Reptiles at Risk, ended up being inspired by the tropical realm at Chester Zoo. Sort of unintentionally. It wasn't meant to be like that, but as the design sort of changed, as I had to adapt and change the shape and things like that, that's just what seemed natural. So it's inspired by, as far as architecture is concerned, it's inspired by the tropical realm at Chester Zoo. I was at Chester Zoo on Monday, actually. I've got some photos. I had an alright day. I didn't see most of the animals I wanted to see, but such is nature. So here I'm just putting in a boundary fence to mark off the enclosures from the underwater viewing area. And unfortunately, I'm a perfectionist with OCD, so if things aren't lined up to my satisfaction, I get really annoyed about it. We've actually used this fence in the Australia section as well. It's such a versatile design, I thought why not use it again. It's not particularly themed to one area or the other. That tree gets taken out, don't worry, that tree stays in. That stays in. And a little crocodile statue to indicate that you can view them under there. So the roof then, this is the third iteration of the roof. There was a domed roof, a flat roof, and then this one. And I settled on this one, again inspired by the tropical realm at Chester Zoo. The original one was sort of domed-ish, and that was just inspired by a tortoise's shell. Ultimately, I didn't like how much height there was for the building, because all the animals in here are not capable of climbing, so it doesn't need to be a high roof. So I didn't see the point in having a particularly high roof. The second design was flat, and that didn't have enough height for trees and things like that. So then this third design of this like double pointed roof, that works out very well. And again, that's what the one in Chester Zoo's like. Here, the Menelaus blue morpho butterfly walk-through habitat. So I'm just adding some additional plants so it doesn't look quite so barren. It also looks a bit more natural like this as well. It's less sort of obvious, I guess. Obviously it's going to be slightly obvious because the butterflies don't fill the entire space, they just fill the area that you put the walkthrough exhibit in. But ultimately it turns out really well, if I may say so myself. And for this one, I'm not sticking to strictly South American plants. I'm just going for different greens, different coloured plants, things like that. So we're now on the Lesser Antillean iguana. It's a large lizard. I'm sure you all know what iguanas look like by now. They are in severe decline. They're critically endangered due to habitat destruction, hunting, hybridization with the green iguana, and the introduction of feral predators. Rather interestingly, typical sort of curveball from Frontier, successful breeding of this species of iguana in captivity has only happened twice, as most of the eggs laid in captivity, for some reason, tend to be infertile. So for Frontier to include this animal sort of from day one, from base game, absolutely amazing, because it's a critically endangered animal and more awareness needs to be brought to the situation. But it's also very odd, because they're not very good zoo animals if you think about what makes a good zoo animal. You know, it's something that's active and it breeds and stuff like that. We're moving on to the yellow-footed tortoise habitat here. Don't worry about the fence, it doesn't stay that high, it doesn't stay that colour. And whilst we're doing this, just a little bit more information about the Lesser Antillean iguana. It's typically found in woodlands, scrub, rainforests and mangroves throughout the Lesser Antilles on Saint Barth, Anguilla, Guadeloupe, Dominica and Martinique. The species has unfortunately disappeared from Saint-Martin. I assume I'm saying that incorrectly. St. Kitts, Nevis, Barbuda, Antigua, Ile de Saint, and Marie-Galante. Rather interestingly, and I think this is actually incorrect unless it's offshore, lesser Antillean iguanas are currently kept at the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, the Memphis Zoo, San Diego Zoo's Center for the Reproduction of Endangered Species, and Chester Zoo. I was at Chester Zoo on Monday and there was no signage for the Antillean iguana, let alone a living specimen of Antillean iguana. So they either have it offshore permanently, because they do that with some animals, the public never get to see them, or that is incorrect because they're not there. Oh, and of course there's also I don't know how we pronounce this one, the Bliesdorp Zoo in Rotterdam. They have some as well. So there's 4, 11, 8, 23 in captivity. 23. Not including San Diego. There's no count for how many they have. And Chester. Anyway, that's enough about the Antillean iguana. Yellow-footed tortoises, also known as the Brazilian giant tortoise, but they're not particularly giant. It's found in the Amazon basin of South America, and it is vulnerable primarily due to the exotic pet trade. It's the 6th largest tortoise species, and unfortunately they are hunted for food in local markets. So you're not going to pop down to your local Asda and suddenly see yellow-footed tortoise meat, but certainly in South America, despite them being protected, they're still hunted, collected, trapped, you name it, for food and the pet trade. How much of that is the illegal pet trade and how much of that is sustainable and ethically sourced individuals, I have no idea. There's no statistics about that. I would unfortunately imagine the majority of the individuals are taken from the wild rather than bred in captivity. As for the habitat that you would find these tortoises in, there's actually a lot of dispute over what sort of habitat these animals prefer. Some feel that they prefer grasslands and dry forest areas. Others feel that humid forests and rainforest habitats are their preferred area of choice. They are found in rainforest belts, the savanna, grasslands and dry forest areas, and they do actually share some of their range with the red-footed tortoise. But due to deforestation in some areas, the red-footed tortoise has moved out and the yellow-footed tortoise has remained. For the purposes of this, we're keeping all our tortoises separate, just because I don't want any interbreeding or anything like that. Building a little shack here for the yellow-footed tortoises. It doesn't seem lined up, it doesn't look lined up, but according to the grid, it is lined up. So make of that what you will. And here I'm just looking for a lamp, like a heat lamp. We don't have anything like that in the game, unfortunately. You would have to use one of the mod packs. One of the mod packs that I don't have. So I've just used this for now, and I hope we get some different lights in the future at some point. So here we are moving on to the golden poison frog, and this is where the nightmare starts happening. This messes up the pathing inside Reptiles at Risk and outside as well. I do fix it several times, and it is fixed for the final the tour as well, but every time I touch the exhibits, the pathing gets messed up, and it's just an absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Golden poison frogs then, also known as golden poison frogs, golden dart frogs, poison arrow frogs. Either way, they're golden frogs and they're poisonous because of what they eat. They are endangered due to habitat destruction, and they're very small animals, so they have a very limited range. And unfortunately, due to the pet trade, due to slash and burn culture, deforestation, poaching, things like that, their numbers are dwindling. They're endangered. They don't really have much hope unless we do something sooner rather than later. As far as captivity is concerned, it is popular in captivity. They have a very bold personality to go with their bold coloration. Specimens raised in captivity without access to their natural food sources, so like insects and worms and things like that, they're non-toxic, so you can safely handle them. Not that you maybe want to, of course, but you could if you wanted to. If they're born and raised in captivity, it's very likely that they're not actually poisonous. Just don't touch one if you see one in the wild, and if you're not sure, don't touch one anyway, because you never know. Don't take the risk. The majority of golden poison frogs taken from the wild were for the pet trade. However, it's now at a point where there are frog breeders that specifically breed the frogs for captivity. The IUCN has estimated that the probability of golden poison frogs sold for the pet trade is that they're high in the captive population. What's meant by that is that the majority of golden poison frogs in captivity come from other captive lines. They're not taken from the wild these days, though they have been in the past. And what you're seeing there is another frog species, and that's the Clemens poison frog, also known as the red-banded poison frog, native to a very small area of western Colombia. Can be found in tropical rainforests. Again, the pet trade and habitat loss, and it is critically endangered because of the threats from habitat loss and the pet trade. And here we are with the finished thing. I didn't bother showing you the Galapagos tortoise habitat or the red-footed tortoise habitat, simply because it's just a rinse and repeat job of the yellow-footed tortoise habitat. So we'll go into the underwater viewing now for the Orinoco crocodile, and we get some really, really good shots down here. I'm super, super happy with that. So you can see we've got one swimming sort of on the water and one swimming under the water. They are a little bit buggy. I have reported it as a bug issue, They actually float above the water, they don't sit in it. So it's a good job we aren't viewing them from above at the moment. We get some really nice shots here actually. So we've got that one swimming near the surface, and then we've got one just to the right, sort of coming straight towards us, and then it unfortunately changes its mind last minute. Yeah, look at that. You imagine being in an actual zoo and seeing something like that. Head-on crocodile coming straight towards you underwater. Just millions of years of evolution. Super predator. Face to face. It's amazing. So we of course head back up, and we have our golden poison frog habitats. We've got 2 of them because of course they are endangered or threatened, one of the 2, or vulnerable. They're not critically endangered, I know that much. Again, 2 habitats for them, just because why not? 2 exhibits technically, but you know what I mean. For some reason it pauses there and then it comes back. It's weird. It wasn't lag though, which I can't work out. Let's say here we go. We've got the derpy Orinoco crocodiles. You can see there that they're floating above the water rather than sitting in it. None of the donation billboards are ready yet, apart from the Galapagos giant tortoise. And we've got our yellow-footed tortoise habitat here. Really sort of like how this turned out. It could do with a bit more texture in it, I think. Some rocks, some different terrain, stuff like that. But they're happy like this, so I don't see a reason why we need to overcrowd the habitat for what is quite a small animal. And of course we continue to head round. There's the land viewing for the Orinoco crocodile, little staff area, and then just before the butterfly walkthrough you can get a final look at the yellow-footed tortoises. The Menelaus Blue Morpho, I don't know much about off the top of my head. I haven't got anything in front of me either to sort of prompt me regarding that. Just read the Zoopedia in the game and that'll probably tell you the basics of everything you need to know. Then we also have the Galapagos giant tortoise coming up. They are all classed as threatened by the IUCN. Unfortunately, due to human exploitation, the first decline was around 250,000 individuals, and that was primarily for food because humans like to eat tortoise meat apparently. In a 1974 census there were only 3,060 individuals, and as of 2009, which is a very old statistic still, there was 19,317 individuals. So we need more. A more recent statistic. But yeah, it's primarily like whalers and fair people, fair sealers, people that kill seals for their fare. Horrible people. It was mainly them that caused the wipeout for Galapagos tortoises. I think actually the majority of these animals are linked in human impact. We, either historically or currently, are responsible for their decline. So we have a duty to reverse that and rectify mistakes and decisions in the past. That said, however, Galapagos giant tortoises, they're susceptible to what's called alien species. So these are like feral pigs, dogs, cats, rats. These all predate on the eggs and the young tortoises, whilst things like goats, donkeys and cattle compete for grazing sites, as well as trampling the nests. And this did lead to the extinction of a subspecies of Galapagos giant tortoise in the mid-19th century, it says here. So that's one gone. But typically, modern conservation protects them. The remaining subspecies of the tortoise range anywhere between extinct in the wild to vulnerable. They unfortunately have a slow growth rate, a late sexual maturity, and island endemism, which makes them particularly prone to extinction without help from conservationists. So we have to step in. And the last species then is the red-footed tortoise that we're looking at here. Another tortoise, much like the yellow-footed tortoise, but with red feet, from northern South America. They are related to the yellow-footed tortoise from the Amazon basin. They're kept as pets, and over-collection has led them to be vulnerable to extinction. It doesn't say that in game, I think it says data deficient. But here it does say, due to the pet trade and over-collection, they're vulnerable to extinction. The main threats for adults are jaguars and humans, habitat destruction, food. Again, they're collected for food. It's just... it's horrible, really, to be honest, isn't it? But there we go. These tortoises, they're not on screen now anymore, but they are considered especially at risk in Argentina and Colombia, and more at risk than the yellow-footed and Chaco tortoises. But there we are. They are popular tortoises around the world. They're relatively inexpensive. They have interesting personalities, and should you wish to purchase one, not that I would advise you do, you can do so from a reliable captive bred source where possible. And so here we are at the end, my friends. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, helps the channel grow. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JW_YT, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye bye for now, my friends, and thank you for watching.